Welcome to the Happy Market Research Podcast, your favorite place for strategies, stories, and insights from the world of market research. Brought to you by your host, Dan Fleetwood.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Happy Market Research Podcast. I have a very special guest today. I have Janani Venkataraman from Bill. She is the Director of Market Research there. So, Janani, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Great. Well, I'm excited to dive into our conversation today. And before we do, can you give a little bit of background, maybe an intro around yourself and what you're all about? And then we can go ahead and get started.
Sure. So I lead market research and insights here at Bill. And in my role, I support what we call go-to-market teams at Bill. Broadly, that includes sales, marketing, CX teams. I've been in research and insights just over 15 years now. And I've been fortunate, I would say, Dan, to work across agency land, client side, a bit on the supplier side of the business too. So I've had that fortunate experience of understanding the research business from all these perspectives. I've spent a lot of time in SaaS companies, a long career in media and entertainment as well, and currently in fintech. So it's been fun to kind of see how insights shapes decisions across multiple industries and multiple types of organizations too.
Yeah, so you've had quite the career. I mean, from media and insights to now at Bill, and then both on the client side and agency side. You have a unique perspective, I'm sure, on those things. And then how did you make the shift from agency to a client side? Was that something that you always wanted to do, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I started in agency land. Love the agency land for the kind of rigor and the grit that it helps you develop as a researcher. I did that for several years, and I had this, I would say, itch to understand what really happens to the work after it's been kind of delivered and shared with the clients. So that kind of burning desire to be a part of that journey sort of saw me move from agency to client side. But having done that, I did, after a few years, go back to agency land and kind of came back. So I've moved around a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that gives you some great experience, I'm sure. So I want to dive into the conversation, but before I do, here's a question that I like to ask guests, and I know listeners get a lot of value out of this. So if a listener followed you around on a messy Tuesday or a random Tuesday, what ritual would they see you repeating over and over again?
Yeah. So recently, Tuesdays are my what I call listening days, and the listening day has shifted around the day of the week. But recently, Tuesday is my listening day, and I spend that day with talking to my stakeholders. It's all about kind of understanding what's top of mind for them right now. In some sense, what's keeping them up at night. Because often I find when research briefs land on our desk, it only offers a tiny sliver of the problem space. And I go back to the conversations I've had with that same stakeholder over the last 3 to 6 months, and I see a much deeper problem or an issue at play, which I wouldn't have been able to understand if I hadn't spent that time in relationship building and just listening. So that is my Tuesday these days.
Listening day. I love that. I wasn't expecting that, but it makes sense. I mean, do all your days have themes then, or is it just
just Tuesday, I'm afraid.
Okay. I like it. And then in terms of, kind of transitioning a little bit here, in terms of market research, what's the biggest shift you've seen over the past few years? Is it AI? Is it something else? What would you say to that?
I mean, I think this wouldn't be a podcast in 2026 if we didn't mention the word AI or didn't talk about AI.
Fair enough.
But that aside, I'm definitely seeing this shift from a project-based execution to almost an insights system. At least that's pretty much the theme that I'm hearing from a lot of my peers and a lot of my industry counterparts. How do you create an ongoing, always-on system of insights that is able to plug into questions and decisions in real time is really the competitive advantage, I would say, because gone are the days where you would wait for the brief to land on your desk, work on that study, do a big, reveal. That's definitely no longer the case. And if anything, AI has only sort of exacerbated that trend.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like these always on insights, right? There's never a downtime, right? And I love what you mentioned earlier around like behind the brief. Like there's always something behind that. And I think the more you can get to like what the problem that they're trying to solve, right? Probably the better off you are and the better off your team is as well. In terms of like what's a topic in research that you feel isn't talked enough about right now? Is there something that you can think of?
I think obviously with all things AI, there's a fundamental shift in how things are being done, and we see this everywhere. I'm sure you see this in your role and work, and certainly in my day to day, I see the very foundation of how product development is done, how marketing is done, is all shifting. But the way we do research, at least at this moment in time, is still largely the same, right?
Yeah.
We are integrating, at least many of the AI forward teams that I have spoken to, including ours, we are integrating research AI into the research workflow. But the workflow in its current shape and form is largely the same as it used to be 10 years or 20 years ago. So we plan, we execute, we do the research, and then we deliver the reports. And there's AI kind of interspersed in this workflow. But I think what is going to happen very, very quickly is this entire workflow changing in its very shape and form. And this sort of goes back to the point I was making around always on, or like an insight system rather than a project-based execution.
Got it. That makes sense. And then, in terms of another angle that I know, you've been involved with recently is synthetic data, right? I think it's, in addition to AI, I feel like synthetic data is now kind of an adjacent point that we also talk about in relation to it. What's been your experience with synthetic data, and how have you utilized it recently?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I work in the fintech space. Our core audience is financial decision makers. We talk to, very, very senior level financial professionals. Obviously, talking to this type of audience comes at a cost, and a pretty steep one at that. So being able to do research or larger scale research work that requires this type of sample is getting difficult. It's getting cost prohibitive. And it's also becoming a challenge purely and simply because of the quality of the sample that we're getting. I mean, in some of the projects I've thrown out more than 40% of the sample, would you believe, in terms of having a good quality data set. So synthetic was sort of we were forced to look at synthetic solution as an alternative. And so far, we've done 2 experiments here at Bill, different types of projects using synthetic data. And it has been a pretty interesting learning journey, I would say, for me personally, in figuring out what role and where does synthetic data play, in this research ecosystem, and how do we make best use of it for different scenarios, particularly in my situation in the fintech B2B financial decision maker profile.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So are you finding that synthetic data kind of fills that gap then between, I guess you mentioned that there's quality on one side, and then also you need reliable results, right? And like those two obviously intersect, along with cost, I guess, is another component. Are you finding that synthetic data like adequately fills that gap you're trying to fill?
I'm not going to say a resounding yes just yet. It has been it has been showing signs of promise. One of the experiments, I'll give you a little bit of a background there. We were looking to basically synthetically augment a particular segment of the sample using the source data, which was the source data set, which had a pretty big base size. We had over 2,500 respondents in that particular study. So we had a pretty large data set, but that segment that I was particularly interested in had a much lower base size. So we used synthetic sample to augment that segment. It took a couple of rounds of iteration, tweaking the factors, tweaking the variables to get to a sample that felt real and felt comparable to the rest of the data set, and also comparable to the human sample that we had in that segment.
Right.
But it was not this click a button, generate 300 responses type of a situation that you see talked about in the at least in the literature that we see around around LinkedIn. It was definitely a lot more work intensive than that, in terms of figuring out what variables or what factors to control for, which helps us land at the sample that is truly reflective of what we want this to be. So I would say in that our learning, or my learning in that particular experiment, is synthetic boosting works really well at predicting the averages. It's the edge cases and the outliers that we don't stand a chance with synthetic sample on that one.
Makes sense. So the averages, it works, but the outliers, it's difficult. And you bring up an interesting point, because I think a lot of people do have this image of synthetic data. I hit a button and boom, I get all the responses I need, and it's just it's perfect. But it's not necessarily the case, right? You have to kind of factor in the different variables and what you're looking for. So
100%. And the second experiment, so we did that. We got some level of confidence and decided to kind of up the ante, if you will, in terms of the second experiment, where there was a whole lot of contextual understanding piece that we had to do, right? So that project took weeks of foundational setting up in terms of helping the LLM understand what is the context of this financial decision-making audience, controller type audience that we are interested in. What are their kind of factors, drivers of decision making, and then kind of moving on to the ask from the research.
Yeah, so it's really, I guess, all the preemptive things that you did with the prompts and getting all the information in there that really helped out with the synthetic sample, then, right?
And the knowledge that we have on hand, right? Like, what do we already know about this audience? Whether that's qualitative or quantitative data. So even things like gong calls, sales conversations with these customers or prospects, that type of unstructured data was also used to kind of augment our contextual understanding piece for the synthetic training.
That's a good point. You pulled a lot of different sources, and it makes a ton of sense now that I'm thinking about it. So that's very interesting.
Yes, it was. We did learn that the more we pulled information, the more we sort of brought data from multiple sources, the better it worked in terms of that contextual understanding piece. But that also comes with a challenge, Dan, because you've got both unstructured and structured data to deal with, and making sense of this. And the people that you've spoken to in these sales conversations are not the people who have probably responded to some of your previous surveys. So there's this whole piece around, you've got no shortage of data, but how do you make sense of it all and teach the LLM to make sense of it all was the challenge.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wasn't thinking at first about the structured and unstructured piece of it and having it all come together. Where do you see synthetic research, synthetic data fitting into your overall research toolkit moving forward?
Um, at this, I'm sure, ask me in 6 months, my answer would probably
Yeah,
be
that's
a
fair.
lot
That's
different.
fair.
But at this point in time, I do think it's a really good kind of augmentation layer, particularly in use cases like testing concepts, or
Hmm.
if you've got product concepts that you can't or don't want to put in front of customers, and unpacking reactions to creatives, messaging testing. So those are some of the use cases where I see synthetic data working fairly well.
Hmm.
And the I guess the greater the specificity required to answer a particular question,
Hmm.
lower is the chance that a synthetic sample is going to do it for you.
Got it.
So I would definitely pick use cases like that. And the best, or the biggest advantage with synthetic is there's no fatigue. You can
Yeah.
run 10, 20 concepts or 20 creatives, narrow it down to maybe the winning two or three, and then have some human layer of kind of feedback and evaluation.
Yeah, that's a good point. The fatigue, and yeah, you're not dealing with a real person, right? So they're not going to get tired.
Exactly.
Makes sense. It makes sense. So I want to switch gears a little bit, but closely related, and something you kind of touched on earlier around AI enabled research teams and workflows. So, what does an AI enabled research team actually look like in practice from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, again, here at Bill, we are fortunate to actually have the time and space to be able to run experiments, to be able to
Yeah.
do a lot of let's try this, see if it works. If it doesn't, that's fine too. Type of a mandate from our leadership, which is great. This has been really useful for us to kind of, first of all, explore and then figure out, are these things helpful and useful? If so, let's find meaningful ways of integrating them into our workflow. We haven't quite gotten to the stage of how do you change the workflow,
Hmm.
because there are some pieces where we're starting to see that we're spending less and less time on. Take the take the example of summarizing interviews.
Yeah.
We've got an AI agent now that does that, and does a decent job at that.
Hmm.
Sure, there's that layer of a researcher kind of reviewing that work and making sure the interpretation is correct, and then sort of taking that into the synthesis and report stage.
Hmm.
But I think where we are sort of slowly but surely moving to is removing a lot of the kind of processes and steps in our workflow that can be automated, and really kind of double clicking on the pieces where judgment and critical thinking and a researcher's expertise
Hmm.
is required. This is the workflow that we are kind of trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And not to get too into the weeds, but do you objectively like take a look at, hey, this is the entire workflow from, point A to, to point Z, like all the way across, and say, hey, where can we utilize AI to help out with, particular parts of the workflow? Or are you kind of just, is it more sort of ad hoc? We're like, oh, we should use AI for this. How are you approaching it from that perspective?
Oh, definitely a lot more systematic and
Yeah.
very, very structured, I would say, because we're going all the way from how do you even kind of plan for research
Hmm.
to, or how do you even kind of anticipate questions before they come to us, to, the point of having this always on insights kind of body or knowledge that
Yeah.
people can tap into and learn from. Every step of the way is being looked at to evaluate what can be automated, what can be, AI-fied, and then which pieces must and should have our judgment and critical thinking.
Hmm. Hmm. One question, and then this is a little bit maybe not a curveball, but something I was just thinking about recently. Do you feel like there was a lot of fear around AI, and now there's more confidence around it. And I guess what I mean by that, I think when it first, kind of came onto the scene of 2023 or so, there was a lot of like, oh, I don't want this, to take my job, and I don't want, I don't know about this. So there's a lot of, kind of fear based around it. I feel more that there's a certain level of confidence, like, okay, as long as I know how to utilize AI and I can bring it into my job with more efficiencies and just improving workflows, I feel like the confidence is there, right? And if the confidence isn't there, I'd encourage people to get that and to really lean into AI. Do you feel the same way, or what are your thoughts around that?
I completely agree. I mean, even take the example of the synthetic experiments that I was
Yeah.
talking about. Having done both the experiments that I was telling you, I feel pretty confident about the limitations of synthetic research,
Hmm.
at least at this point in time,
Right.
which makes me go, okay, this is not the be all end all for everything that the organization wants. There is a place for synthetic research, and me as a researcher can help and shape research projects that require and can successfully be executed with synthetic research. But then there are others where this will not cut it. So
Hmm.
I think with more broadly with AI kind of in getting ingested into the workflow, there's more awareness now, I would say, collectively as a team of where are the limitations, where does it fail,
Hmm.
therefore requires our expertise as researchers and insights professionals. And I think that has come because of the amount of time and effort spent in experimenting and like doing things. Let's fail,
Yeah.
and let's learn where we have failed. And that's given people a lot of confidence. I would say collectively, speaking just for my own team,
Mhm.
we do feel a lot more confident purely and simply because of all this experimentation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And not being afraid to fail, right? Like, not everything you try is going to work out, but hey, you got to
Yes.
try it, or else you'll never know. So, um, I got to ask, what's your favorite AI work hack right now? Is there something in particular that you can share?
Yeah, I love how AI has helped me with my own kind of productivity and learning journey,
Hmm.
Dan. So I've got like a AI agent that sends me news articles, or it summarizes those news articles too
Hmm.
on the topic of synthetic research, right? So I
Nice.
get
Yeah.
this sent to me once every day, and there are sources that I point to it in terms of, these are some of the kind of thought leaders and subject matter experts that I do want to follow. But equally, I give it some free rein and say, look for articles or papers or industry information that I need to know about.
Hmm.
And it has been a really interesting way to consume information and to learn, frankly. And then I've got an AI agent kind of scans my calendar, looks for places where it can put a time
Nice.
block and protects my time to do some intro heads down work. So beyond the scope of research and insights, I do think AI does a pretty fantastic job of helping with our own productivity and learning. And
Yeah.
if we know how to use it, then it just makes life so much easier for all of us, for sure.
Yeah. No, I love those two hacks. I'm going to do the calendar one is great. I utilize that
Yeah,
as well. But I like the agent, like, just, hey, find me information that I don't have to go search for it. And you tell me what's important. That's awesome.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. Kind of switching gears a little bit here in terms of, when do you feel most in flow at work? Is there a certain time that you feel most like, hey, I'm in the groove, I'm doing my thing? Is there something that comes to mind there?
Um, I'm just trying to think about, because the last couple of weeks have been like
Yeah, that's true.
one thing to other to another one. I think there are some kind of areas of work that I really enjoy. Very often, I was talking about my listening Tuesdays.
Yeah, I love that.
Um, from time to time, I would kind of sit and look at my notes across multiple stakeholders, and there would be this kind of pattern that emerges in terms of the problems or the conversations that I've had. And there'll be like this invisible line that I can draw from this to this to this to this stakeholder conversation. And I'd go, oh my gosh, we should all, like the five of us should talk. That type of work and kind of connecting the dot and finding the commonality or the common thread really, really excites me. And it's something that gives me a lot of joy. It does take a lot of time and effort, but it certainly gives me joy to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I love connecting the dots between different conversations and people, and that makes a ton of sense. Well, this has been a lot of fun. If listeners want to connect with you or learn more about your work, where should they go? Is there a place you can point them?
LinkedIn is where I'm active, so I would love to connect with everyone on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on today. And I know the listeners are going to love this. I loved it. I mean, there's so many AI hacks and things are changing by the day with AI, by the hour. So we'll have to do this again sometime to kind of get an update on your feelings around synthetic data, AI workflows, and who knows, new things that you have coming up too. So it'd be great.
Thank you, Dan. This was fun.